Welcome to a new video whereby I confront Christianity. Today I will be talking about Christian antinatalism and why Christianity makes a good case for it. So, antinatalism is the philosophical idea of preventing birth or to stop procreation. Some popular people I know who are defenders of this idea are people like Arthur Schopenhauer and David Benatar. And David Benatar came up with the asymmetry argument. It basically shows that scenario B, in which X doesn't exist, is better than scenario A, in which X does exist. In scenario A, in which X exists, we have presence of pain, which is bad, and presence of pleasure, which is good. Thus, scenario A has one benefit and one cost. In contrast to scenario B, there is absence of pain, which is good, and absence of pleasure, which is not bad, because an absence of pleasure is neither good nor bad, but neutral. Therefore, scenario B has one benefit, and is therefore better than scenario A. From this we can infer life is not worth beginning. And be cautious about this, because it doesn't mean that life is not worth continuing. It solely means that life is not worth beginning. And so far, there haven't been many objections about this asymmetry argument. And the only one I could think of is that morality in the atheist worldview, there is no morality. Thus, there is no moral obligation to prevent procreation. So let me explain this. Now let's talk about ambiguity. So there is this tiny bit of wisdom I think is important to talk about. And that is that meaning is context dependent. Now I've been using the terms good and bad. For example, presence of pain is bad and presence of pleasure is good. But we use words such as good and bad within various circumstances. You might ask, what is 2 plus 2? And the other responds, the answer is 4. Then we might say, that's a good answer. But what do we actually mean? We mean to say his answer was true. Another example might be, one might eat vegetables, and we say that is good. But what we really mean is that it's healthy. Another example is that we might rescue a cat from a tree, and someone says that's a good thing you did there. And what he really means is that it was a moral thing of you to do such a thing. And the same can be said about the term bad. So what you're eating is bad or unhealthy, or that is the wrong answer, it's a false answer. What you did there is wrong, it is immoral. Now, looking back at the asymmetry argument, we can see a lot of terms such as good and bad. And I think the best 4 substitutes for these terms are moral and immoral and pleasant and unpleasant. I believe David Benatar's asymmetry argument stands very well. He is right, in my case. Existence is worse than non-existence, but only in terms of it being unpleasant. If we take the terms moral and immoral, then is scenario A immoral in comparison to scenario B, which is moral? There is no moral standard in the atheist worldview. Thus, there is no moral obligation to prevent new life. In my case, we are left with this argument stating existence is bad and non-existence is good. But now it's a question of why should we care? Now, what I will try and argue is that the moral aspect of the asymmetry argument does work for Christianity. So to make my argument here, I will be going over to 3 arguments namely sinless creation, God's reversing, and the gamble. So we will start with sinless creation. If you have read the Bible, then Adam and Eve did not have children prior to the fall. But if they did, the children would have been sinless. It is in this context that Adam and Eve were told to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. And at the fall of man, this no longer applies. Every child from that point inherited Adam's broken nature. And this broken nature can be clearly read in the Bible, where God drowns humanity in Genesis 6. Prior to the flood, in verse 5, God states, "The Lord saw that the wickedness was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." God repeats his indictment after the flood in chapter 8, verse 21. "Never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood." So, taking back the asymmetry argument, we can infer from the fact that all children who will inherit the sin of Adam, their non-existence is better than existence. Now, one question remains: what is the moral obligation here? It should be obvious from here that God does not want a multitude of sinful people. God's reaction to sinful people is not to make more of them, but to kill them. Alright, God's reversing. So you might still be saying, well, yes, but still said to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. So to answer this, we will be moving on to God's reversing. Now, where does the moral obligation come in place? The clue is in Genesis 3:15. When God curses the serpent, he states, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and he will strike his heel." God here is making a promise. The fall that the serpent caused will be reversed. The offspring, or seed, of the woman will crush the serpent's head. More verses on antinatalism can be found here. "So I have praised the dead that are already dead, more than the living that are yet alive. But better than both of them is he who has not yet been, who has not seen the evil work that is done under the sun." And some more antinatalist verses. "And Job spoke and said, Oh, that the day had perished within I was born, and that the night which said, There is a man-child conceived. Let that day be darkness. As for the night, let darkness seize upon it, because it did not shut up the doors of my mother's womb. Why did I not die from the womb? Why did I not perish when I came out of the belly? For now I should have lain still and been quiet. Or, as a hidden, untimely birth I had not been, as infants that never saw light." So, Christians often prefer biblical ethics for moral knowledge. Thus, I suppose there is no disagreement on the moral obligation to prevent new life. But let's tackle down some objection, which is the gamble. Alright, the gamble. So one of the objections which could destroy this argument is by saying children will be sinless if they grow up as Christians, because then there would be no castes in existence. And the point is that parents do not know if their child will grow up as Christians. Thus the parents are gambling, even risking their child's eternal damnation. It is a gamble because some Christians have grown up and even left their religion later on, and some have moved into Christianity later in their lives, and even moved out of it. So not all children will grow up as Christians. Again, you're gambling, thus risking them eternal damnation. Now, this was my first video on confronting Christianity. I'll be making some more videos in the future, but it might take some time. So so far, Goodbye and have a nice day.